When the psychologist saw Charles's file, the extent of his childhood traumas shocked him. The man standing before him would one day be the King of England, but he was also a deeply wounded child. These traumas would destroy not only Charles, but Diana as well. It was a cold November night in 1950. Only the footsteps of nannies could be heard in the corridors of Buckingham Palace. 2-year-old Charles was crying in his crib, but no one was coming. Royal protocol was very clear. Princes should not seek attention by crying. Elizabeth was only 24 and had no idea about motherhood. Her own mother had been cold and distant too. The emotional distance that had continued for generations would continue with Charles as well. But no one knew the price of this yet. Children must learn their duties, Queen Mother would say. Emotionalism is a sign of weakness in the royal family. Little Charles spoke his first words to his nanny. He took his first steps with his nanny. When he fell for the first time, his nanny picked him up. His mother, Elizabeth, was busy with royal duties. Philip had also been raised with a military education mentality and was applying the same to his son. "Men don't cry," Philip would shout when Charles shed tears. "You will be king in the future. Kings don't show weakness." When Charles was just 3 years old, Philip was planning to send him to boarding school. Elizabeth objected, but Philip's word was final. "I went to boarding school at the same age. I became a man. He will become a man too." But what was truly shocking was the brutality of the educational methods Philip applied to Charles. Philip's educational philosophy was very simple. Men don't cry, men don't fear, men aren't emotional. This philosophy came from the education he himself had received at Gordonstown. But Philip had decided to apply this system to 2-year-old Charles. The first training session began when Charles was 3 years old. Charles was playing in the palace gardens when he fell and injured his knee. When the little child started crying, Philip immediately intervened. "Stop right there," he shouted. "Men don't cry when they fall. They get up and continue." While tears flowed from Charles's eyes, Philip dragged him inside the palace. "Now, you will learn what it means to be a man." Philip took Charles to a cold room. He told him he had to stand on the stone floor. "You will stay here until you stop crying. Men don't cry." 3-year-old Charles waited in that cold room for hours. His feet were numb. He was cold. He was scared. But he couldn't stop crying. Philip would come and check periodically. "Are you still crying?" he would ask. When Charles nodded, he would say, "Then you'll wait longer and leave." Finally, little Charles stopped crying from exhaustion. When Philip entered the room, he looked at his son. "Now you're acting like a man," he said. "Don't forget this lesson." But this was just the beginning. Philip's man-making project would reach more brutal dimensions. When Charles turned 4, Philip decided to teach him to swim. But his method was shocking. He dropped Charles directly into the deep end of the pool. "The only way to learn to swim is to jump into water," he said. "You'll struggle to survive." Charles panicked. He was thrashing in the water, drowning. Philip stood at the edge, watching. "Swim, Charles. Men don't fear," he was shouting. Finally, a staff member pulled Charles out of the water. The child was coughing, shivering, traumatized. Philip's reaction was shocking. He acted weak. "We'll try again tomorrow." These swimming lessons continued for weeks. Charles would enter the water with fear each time. He eventually learned to swim, but also started having panic attacks. When Elizabeth noticed this situation, she approached Philip. "Charles is having nightmares at night," she said with concern. Philip's response was cold. "Nightmares pass. Character remains. This child needs to have character." "But Philip, he's only 4 years old. Maybe a little softer." The moment Philip cut Elizabeth off, the tension reached its peak. "Elizabeth, you may be queen, but you know nothing about raising boys. I am the father, and I will educate this child. Don't interfere." Elizabeth quietly retreated that day, and this retreat became one of the greatest tragedies of Charles's life. His mother couldn't protect him. Philip's next education method was even more ruthless. He began applying fear therapy to Charles. "Men fear nothing," he would say. "You will face your fears too." Charles was afraid of the dark. When Philip learned this, he started locking him in the dark basement. "You will stay here until you become friends with darkness," he would say. 5-year-old Charles would stay in the basement alone for hours. He was scared of shadows, frightened by sounds, crying. But no one would come. This darkness therapy was repeated several times a week. Charles's fear didn't go away, but he learned to be silent. He no longer said he was afraid. One of Philip's most brutal practices was pain endurance training. He wanted Charles to endure pain. "Life hurts," Philip would say. "Men endure pain." He forced Charles into harsh exercises. At age 5, doing push-ups, running, carrying heavy objects. When Charles felt tired, Philip would shout, "No rest! Men don't get tired!" One day, Charles fainted while exercising. The palace doctor was called. "The child is exhausted," the doctor said. "He needs rest." Philip's response was shocking. "Then he's not strong enough. He needs to work harder." The doctor tried to object. "Your Royal Highness, the child is only 5 years old. His body isn't ready for such strain." Philip received this coldly. "I received the same training at age 5. I became a man. He will too." Another method Philip applied to Charles was emotional reset. When Charles showed any emotion, he would reset him. When Charles became happy and smiled, "You're being too relaxed. Maintain your seriousness." When Charles became sad and cried, "You're showing weakness. Men don't cry." When Charles got excited, "You're losing control. Master yourself." This way, all of Charles's natural emotions were suppressed. The child had started behaving like a robot. One of his most ruthless practices was humiliation training. Philip would humiliate Charles in public places. One day in the palace gardens when there were guests, Charles made a small mistake. Philip shouted in front of everyone, "How will you become a prince like this? Shameful!" 6-year-old Charles was diminished in front of the guests. His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry, because he had already forgotten how to cry. Philip's man-making obsession had gone so far that he even controlled Charles's toys. "Men who play with dolls don't exist," he said, taking away Charles's favorite toys. "Men who read books become too soft," he said, banning Charles's fairy tale books. "Men who listen to music become emotional," he said, banning piano lessons. He was destroying Charles's childhood piece by piece. One of the most traumatic moments occurred when Charles was 6 years old. Charles was playing with a friend when he fell and injured his stomach. Blood was flowing. Charles ran to Philip in fear. "Father, I'm hurt." Philip's reaction became famous for its freezing coldness. "Go stay in your room until the wound heals. Men don't feel pain." Charles went to his room alone with his bleeding wound. His nanny wanted to help, but Philip forbade it. "He will take care of himself." That day, Charles understood that his father didn't love him. For a 6-year-old child, this realization was devastating. Philip's educational methods disturbed not only Charles, but also the palace staff. His nanny, Miss Lightbody, tried to tell Elizabeth about the situation. "Your Majesty, Prince Charles has changed a lot. He doesn't laugh anymore, doesn't play, is always quiet." Elizabeth became concerned. "What do you mean?" "The child behaves like a robot, not natural at all, as if he's afraid." Elizabeth decided to discuss this matter with Philip. "Philip, Maybe you're being too harsh with Charles. Philip's response was definitive and non-negotiable. Elizabeth, if you prefer a soft approach, Charles will be a weak king. I'm raising a strong king. But the child looks unhappy. Happiness is a luxury. Duty is important. Charles is learning his duty. After this conversation, Elizabeth also distanced herself from Charles, because she didn't dare stand up to Philip. Philip's final and most ruthless practice was loneliness training. He would leave Charles alone for days. Men get used to loneliness, he would say. You will get used to it too. 6-year-old Charles would wander the rooms alone for hours. He wouldn't talk to anyone. No one would care about him. This loneliness became such a deep trauma that Charles would experience constant fear of loneliness in later years. Philip's masterpiece education was completed when Charles was sent to Cheam School at age 7. He's ready now, he said. He became a man. But Charles hadn't become a man. He had simply killed his emotions. And these dead emotions would cost him dearly in later years. This was exactly when everything changed, because when Charles was sent to Gordonstoun at age 13, his traumas would deepen even further. Gordonstoun was the school Philip himself had attended, a school in Scotland's cold climate that provided Spartan education. Philip thought his son would become a man here. But Gordonstoun was a torture center for Charles. He had to stay in cold rooms. He had to wake up at 6 a.m. and wash in icy water. Expressing emotional needs was forbidden. Other students called Charles the soft prince. They bullied him. Charles tried to tell about these in letters he wrote home. "Dear Mother, I'm struggling here very much. Please take me away," he had written in one letter. Elizabeth's response was cold and formal. "Dear Charles, you have duties. Be a man. Your mother." This letter wounded Charles deeply. All he wanted from his mother was some compassion and understanding. But what he received was another reminder of duty. Charles stayed at Gordonstoun for 5 years. These 5 years shaped his character. He learned to shut down his emotions. He made expressing love impossible. He saw being distant with people as normal. When he finished school at 18, Charles appeared to be a prince ready for the world. But the child inside him had died, and this dead child would cause much harm to Diana in later years. At Cambridge University, Charles felt free for the first time, but he didn't know how to use freedom. He couldn't make friends. He couldn't form emotional bonds. One day he met Camilla Shand. Camilla was different. She was warm, understanding. She saw Charles's wounds. "You're a very lonely person," Camilla had said when they first met. This simple sentence deeply affected Charles. For the first time, someone had truly seen him. His relationship with Camilla was a healing process for Charles. For the first time, he was forming an emotional bond with someone. For the first time, he felt loved. But royal protocols didn't find Camilla suitable. "She's an ordinary girl," the Queen Mother would say. "You must marry a queen candidate." Charles was asked to leave Camilla. This separation wounded Charles again. Again, someone he loved was being taken away. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet, because Elizabeth's rejection of Charles's emotional needs was even more brutal. When Charles turned 30, the royal family wanted him to marry. Diana Spencer was found suitable, young, innocent, someone who would comply with royal protocols. When Charles met Diana, he saw how different she was. Diana was warm, emotional, compassionate. Exactly what Charles needed. But Charles was incompetent when it came to emotional intimacy. When Diana tried to approach him, Charles would withdraw. "Why are you so cold?" Diana had asked during their engagement period. Charles's response revealed his traumas. "This is how I was taught. Emotionalism is weakness." Diana was surprised by this response. But love isn't weakness. Love is strength. Charles couldn't understand Diana's words, because he had never experienced love. When they married, Diana tried to heal Charles. She tried to show him compassion, to establish emotional closeness. But Charles panicked at this approach. The defense mechanisms from his childhood were kicking in. "You're getting too close," he would tell Diana. "Some distance is needed." Diana couldn't understand this request for distance. "But I'm your wife. Why are you afraid to be close?" Charles's response revealed his heartbreaking trauma. People who get close leave. Mother left too. Camilla left too. You will leave too. Diana understood how wounded Charles was at that moment, but it was too late, because Charles had built walls against her healing efforts. When William was born, Diana watched how Charles handled fatherhood. Charles loved his son, but didn't know how to show it. "Hug him," Diana would say. "Children need hugs." Charles's response revealed his past. "No one ever hugged me. I don't know how to hug." Wait a minute. Don't miss this detail. Because Diana's process of discovering Charles's traumas distanced them even further. As Diana learned about Charles's childhood stories, she tried to understand him. Philip's harsh education, Elizabeth's coldness, boarding school trauma. "Charles, you've suffered a lot," Diana said one day. "But you're not a child anymore. You can face these traumas." Charles was angry at these words. "The past stays in the past, Diana. Who I am now is what matters." "But the past has shaped you. You're emotionally closed. You can't be close to me. You can't be close to our children either." These words had pierced Charles, because they were true. Diana tried to convince Charles to go to therapy, talk to a specialist, process these traumas. Charles refused. "Royal family members don't go to therapy. This is a sign of weakness." "But healing isn't weakness. It requires strength." Charles was uncomfortable with Diana's efforts, because facing traumas was painful. During this process, Charles turned to Camilla again. Camilla wasn't trying to change him. She accepted him as he was. "You're perfect," Camilla would say. "You don't need to change." This approach was good for Charles. While Diana was trying to heal him, Camilla loved him as he was. When Diana understood this situation, she was deeply hurt. "I'm trying to improve you. She accepts you as you are. Of course you prefer her." Charles's response showed the depth of his traumas. "Changing hurts too much, Diana. I can't bear any more pain." What you've seen so far is nothing, because the psychological analysis of experts about Charles was striking. Years later, during the divorce process, Charles secretly had to meet with a psychologist. Dr. Amanda Richardson analyzed Charles's traumas. "Prince Charles is experiencing classic attachment disorder," the doctor said in her report. "The emotional neglect he experienced in childhood has shaped his adult relationships." According to the report, Charles's traumas were fear of attachment, fear that loved ones will leave emotional closure, fear of being hurt, intimacy problems, difficulty establishing closeness, approval seeking, constant need to be liked. "These traumas are treatable," the doctor said, "but the patient doesn't want treatment." Charles was shocked when he read this report. His entire life was written there, but he refused treatment. "I'm not sick," he said. "I just received royal education." But when Harry was born, there was a change in Charles. Little Harry looked very much like Diana, emotional, warm, compassionate. Watching Harry, Charles remembered his own childhood, and he decided not to make the same mistakes. He hugged Harry. He played with him. He told him, "I love you." Diana noticed this change. "Charles, you're very different with Harry." "Why?" Charles's response was hopeful. "Because I don't want him to suffer like I did." This confession deeply affected Diana. It showed that Charles could heal. You won't believe it, but Charles's approach to William showed his effort to break the trauma chain. As William grew, Charles tried to be closer to him, but he still struggled. "Dad, why are you afraid to hug me?" 10-year-old William asked one day. Charles couldn't answer this question because he couldn't tell the truth. Diana explained Charles's situation to the children in an age-appropriate way. "Your father saw very little love when he was a child. That's why he struggles to show love." William responded with understanding. "Then I can teach him about love." This innocent expression deeply affected Charles. His son was trying to teach him about love. When William approached Charles, he no longer withdrew. He struggled, but made an effort. "Be good, Dad," William would say when going to school. "You too," Charles would say, and then he would add, "I love you." These words were coming out of Charles's mouth for the first time. And William's happiness showed Charles that healing was possible. His relationship with Harry was easier. Because Harry hadn't been affected by Charles's traumas, he had taken Diana's warmth. Watching Harry, Charles understood what a normal childhood should be like. "Harry is very happy," he said to Diana one day. "Because he knows he's loved," Diana said. "You're loved too, Charles. You just need to make people feel it." After this conversation, Charles slowly began to change. He tried to be closer to his children. The problems between him and Diana continued because Charles's traumas as a husband remained too deep. But as a father, he was making progress. After the divorce, Charles began spending more time with his children, and each time he healed a little more. When William reached high school age, Charles became a very different father to him. Warm, understanding, supportive. "Dad, you're very different from before," William said. Charles's response showed his healing process. "Because I don't want your childhood to be like mine." "What was your childhood like?" Charles shared his past with his son for the first time. Cold parenting, boarding school traumas, emotional distance. William understood. "That's why you had problems with Mom." "Yes. I didn't know how to get close. Your mother tried to teach me, but I was too afraid." "How do you feel now?" Charles answered honestly. "Better. But I'm still learning." This dialogue showed Charles's determination to break the trauma chain. He hadn't lived his own childhood, but he was promising his sons a different childhood. Years later, when William became a father, he became a very different father from Charles. Warm, compassionate, emotional. "William is a very good father," Charles said to a friend one day. "You became a good father too, Charles, under difficult circumstances." Charles responded thoughtfully, "I did my best, but what William can do is much more, because he knows love." This confession was like a summary of Charles's healing journey. He hadn't fully overcome his traumas, but he hadn't passed them on to the next generation. Charles is 75 years old today. He still struggles with emotional closeness, but now he knows the reason and accepts it. "I wasn't a perfect father," he says today, "but my children became better fathers than me. That's enough for me." Charles's story teaches us this. Traumas pass from generation to generation, but they can be broken with conscious effort. Charles couldn't live his own childhood, but he ensured his sons could live theirs. This is perhaps his greatest achievement. And perhaps Diana's most beautiful legacy was her effort to teach Charles about love. She couldn't succeed, but she planted seeds. Today, when we watch William's approach to his children, we can see the fruit of Diana's seeds. Because love can be learned, traumas can be healed, and the past doesn't have to determine the future. Charles's story is painful, but hopeful. because it shows that it's never too late to heal.